Good morning and welcome to today's administrative meeting of the Maryland Public Service Commission. We have a number of items on the agenda this morning, but before we get started today, I would like to make a personnel announcement. I recognize that we're losing yet another star employee, Joanne Hernandez. Is Joanne in the room? Oh, she's in the back there. If you could just stand up for a moment. Joanne's last day with the PSC is this coming Friday. She has been working with the accounting division for about 2 years, over 2 years now. And from what I heard from her supervisors and colleagues, she will be dearly missed. She's worked on a number of cases, notably the Washington Gas Light Stride matter, as well as some fuel purchase adjustment clause cases. Joanne and I had a chance to meet recently, and she told me that she's moving over to DLLR over in the Preston complex. And she has assured me that she will make sure that the building's elevator certificates, which have been expired now for almost a year, will be renewed, and hopefully we'll have safe and reliable elevator service in the building. But she'll be helping DLLR out with a number of their thorny accounting issues, so our loss is their gain. Joanne, thank you for your service, and we look forward to seeing you back in the building sometime soon. We do need an elevator stride. I think we will recommend that to the legislators in Annapolis. Do commissioners have any opening statements? We have minutes from the administrative meeting, our last administrative meeting, which was October the 10th. Do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes from the October 10th administrative meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Madam Secretary, the consent agenda, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There are 8 items on the consent agenda, and those items are number 1, Verizon Maryland, LLC, filed on September 24, 2018, joint application for approval of a new interconnection agreement between Verizon Maryland, LLC, and Arius, Inc. Number 2 is XO Communication Services, LLC, filed on September 27, 2018, a request to detariff its regulated retail services. Item 3 is NetTalkCom, Inc., filed on September 20, 2018, request to cancel its operating authority. Item 4 is Planet Energy Corp., filed on October 1, 2018, notice of use of trade name. Number 5 and 6 are filings by Oasis Power LLC and Spark Energy LLC, filed on June 13, 2018, which were joint notices of assignment of customer contracts from Oasis to Spark. And items 7 and 8 are filings by HYCO Energy LLC and Spark Energy Gas LLC, both filed on September 11, 2018, and both are joint notices of an assignment of customer contracts from HYCO to Spark.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions on any of the consent items? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For item number 1, I move that we approve the interconnection agreement 10 days following a 30-day comment period, assuming no adverse comments are submitted. For item number 2, I'd move that we grant the company's request to detariff its regulated retail services. For item number 3, I'd move that we cancel the company's license to operate as a telecommunications carrier in Maryland. And for items number 4 through 8, I'd move that we note the filings.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motions for items number 1 through 8 are approved.
Moving on to the administrative agenda, item number 9 is Global Tel Link Corporation, Value Added Communications, Inc., filed on August 27, 2018, notice of intention to participate in certain financing arrangements.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. This item addresses new financing by 4 Maryland telecommunications companies. Each of the companies that will participate provides communication services to inmates in correctional facilities pursuant to authorization granted by the Commission. Therefore, each of the companies is a public service company under the Public Utilities Article. Therefore, as a result of that, Commission approval is required under PUA 5203 and 6101 for the companies to participate in the financing. However, the financing does satisfy the 3 requirements for exemption from the need for Commission authorization. Staff does believe, though, that the financing is in the public interest. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission note the financing.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Seeing no questions, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission note the financing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you.
Item number 10 is Hampton Roads Sanitation District filed on August 10, 2018, an application for certification as a renewable energy facility for the Maryland Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard Program.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kevin Mosier on behalf of staff. The Hampton Road Sanitation District is a 2.2 megawatt landfill facility located in Virginia. It's a behind-the-meter facility applying for certification as a renewable energy facility in Maryland. As it is landfill gas and located in the PJM service territory, it qualifies under Public Utilities Article 7-701. Staff recommends the Commission approve the facility and issue a renewable energy certification number. Furthermore, the applicant should establish a REC account with PJM GATS within 30 days of certification and file an on-site and behind-the-meter generation report within 1 week of each recording with the data in GATS.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. This is the first time I'm seeing a certificate for, or a request for a REC certificate. How often do we receive these at the PSC on an annual basis?
On a solar, from a solar standpoint, and those don't actually come to the admin, those are maybe 5,000-10,000 a year. For non-solar, once every couple of weeks.
Question.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I note this is this a government facility applying for this? What is this entity?
I believe it is. Yes, it is a subdivision of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
So our RECs are going to be going out of state to a government entity in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm sure the good citizens of the Commonwealth appreciate the ratepayers of Maryland sending our hard-earned money to the Commonwealth of Virginia and their government entity, and I just wanted to note that for the edification of the Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Other commissioners? Thank you. Seeing no further questions, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, for item number 10, I move we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility certification number and direct the company to establish a REC account with PJM GATS within 30 days of certification and file an on-site and behind-the-meter generation report with the Commission within 1 week of each recording of generation data with GATS, and direct the company to file notice with the Commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the application.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you.
Item number 11 is One Energy Blue Star Solar, LLC, filed on August 30, 2018, notice of relinquishment of CPCN, case number 9387.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a filing by One Energy Blue Star Solar, LLC, notifying the Commission that it is relinquishing the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity granted in case number 9387. The filing states that One Energy does not intend to construct the 6-megawatt project for which the CPCN was granted, but may construct facilities in Kent County that comply with the Commission's net energy metering regulations. The filing is a follow-on from the Commission's February 2018 ruling that dividing the original 6-megawatt project into 3 nominally separate 2-megawatt projects would not make the projects eligible for net energy metering. Staff recommends that the Commission rescind One Energy Blue Star Solar LLC's CPCN.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. Where was this facility to be located in the state?
It's in Kent County. I think it would be a little ways east of Centerville.
Okay. Thank you. Their filing didn't include much in terms of their intentions. Do you know any more than what was contained in their filing?
Not much. I was thinking about giving the lawyer a call to just ask them if they had any specific plans at this point. But I didn't have a chance to actually do that, so I can't really say I know what they're going to do. The filing intimates that they're planning on constructing 1 or more 2-megawatt or less size plants, and that's really all I have as far
Thank
as
you, Mr. Spivak. Perhaps this guest may have more light to shed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Robin Leone of Saul Ewing, Arnstein & Lear on behalf of the company. It's pretty much what Mr. Spivak said. There is planning going on. I don't think the planning is far enough along at this point. There has been some work with the utility regarding the commission's concerns about separateness of facilities, looking at some of the equipment that's already there and trying to make sure that there will be separateness between whatever is built. But at this time, it's pretty preliminary.
Can I ask what type of equipment is on site at the moment?
I don't think anything is on site. One of the customers would be Washington College, and so they were looking at their equipment, their meters, and so forth.
Okay.
So they would be one of the off-takers in the event that there are net metering facilities built there.
Thank you, Ms. Leone. Commissioners. Commissioner O'Donnell.
So if I recall this case properly, there was a condition on the CPCN that was requested to be waived. Is that correct? Do you know?
I think you are recalling that correctly, Commissioner.
And we denied that based on the fact that, if I recall correctly, we thought it was an attempt to go around the CPCM process, or at least there was some, maybe my opinion, I'm not speaking for the commission on that.
I think it was more of an attempt to get around the net energy metering regulations,
Yeah.
because they already had the CPCN.
Yeah.
And the condition itself that they were seeking to have modified didn't have that much to do with it, but the language of the commission's specific denial is quoted in staff's comments there. It had to do with the interconnection agreements they were actually asking
I
for
see.
approval.
Well, we knew this may be an eventuality that the company may decide to withdraw the project as proposed, and in my opinion, probably unfortunate, but certainly under the prerogative of the company. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. And if I could just add to your comment, there was a change in ownership between the group that actually achieved the CPCN and then the group that came asking for the waiver, and that group was not as was not aware of sort of the past history and was stepping in and believing that what they were asking for was appropriate.
I see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to just confirm, so now it'll be up to the company to work with the county, is that correct? And is the county aware of this change, that there's no longer a CPCN, and that this project will now be completely under their purview?
Again, I don't know what they've done in terms of contacting the county and speaking to them. Certainly, any permitting that's going to have to get done is going to have to be done within the constraints of the county's zoning laws and other other laws, as far as conservation laws and anything applicable. And I think the company is well aware of that, and the county is at least aware of the company.
The company and the county have been working collaboratively on this, and the county is very supportive of having solar projects in the county, and they were definitely supporting this initially before the changes occurred.
Okay, even up to the fact that it'll be possibly 6 megawatts, but
Yes.
in 3 different projects.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we rescind One Energy Blue Star Solar LLC's CPCN.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Items 12 and 13 can be taken together. Item 12 is Potomac Electric Power Company, Delmarva Power Light Company, filed on September 18, 2018, Schedule CS, report effective October 19, 2018. And item 13 is the Potomac Edison Company, filed on September 24, 2018, revised tariff pages, reflects a closing date for year 1 of Community Solar Pilot Program, as well as a starting date for years 2, 3 of the Community Solar Pilot Program.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Phil Vanderhayden on behalf of the Commission staff. These 2 filings are revisions to the community solar tariffs from the PHI companies, Delmarva and Pepco, as well as the Potomac Edison Company. PG&E also has a similar revision, but it's on next week's administrative agenda. The tariff revisions will accomplish 3 objectives. First, to set for each utility a start date for the year 2 application process, and second, to close out the year 1 capacity. If there's any existing capacity, that would be rolled into year 2. And third, to establish a new limit, that's a 2-project limit for the interconnection application procedure at the beginning of year 2. I'll go over each one of those points just to explain a little further. The year 2 and 3 start date, that's the date and time at which each utility will begin accepting interconnection applications by email for the year 2-3 application process. The interconnection process is effectively the gatekeeper for the application process, as each utility will typically analyze and release interconnections in the order in which they are received. The the project application process requires a signed interconnection agreement as well as two other things: proof of site control and proof of application for permits. The way the schedule worked previously and the way it worked this time, each utility will open the queue at a specific time. In this case, it's 12 noon on a Monday. Each utility would reject applications for their process that are received by them prior to that date. The date schedule for each utility are shown in Table 5 on page 5. The year 2 start dates are shown in the right column. And these are all Mondays, and they're staggered about a week apart when we're skipping the week of November 19th because of the Thanksgiving holiday. The order of the utilities is Pepco, then BG&E, and Potomac Edison, and finally Delmarva. This is the same order we used for year 1, and staggering them allows the subscriber organizations to only focus on getting their applications out for one utility at a time. The order is kind of important. The two PHI utilities are at the beginning and at the end. Pepco's first, Delmarva's at the end. This allows their shared personnel to concentrate on each of their companies one at a time. Applications received for year 2 are automatically added to the wait list for year 3, so we won't be having this process where we have kind of an opening date. That won't be happening again for the rest of the program. We have not yet determined the date on which the utilities will begin allowing construction for year 3, but all of the projects that will be accepted probably in the next month or so, if you approve these tariffs, will be all of the projects for the remaining 2 and 3 years, just that the utilities will have the ability, because of the regulations, to limit the projects that come into year 2. Table 4 on page 4 will show the expected total remaining program capacity, and that would be what has not been used in year 1, and also what will be allowed for in years 2 and 3. I'll talk about the year 1 closeout. So each utility has to close the year 1 because there are still, for some of the utilities, some existing capacity, and I think up until the last couple of weeks there have been 1 or 2 applications to use that. So that needs to be closed out before year 2 opens. So there's a wait list for year 1. That wait list will be essentially removed, and a new list will be started for year 2 and 3. Table 2 on page 3 is showing you what's left over from year 1 that will be rolled into year 2. Each utility will close their year 1 wait list and project queue on the Friday prior to a week prior to the Monday. So they have about a week to handle any administrative issues and calculate the total amount available that they'll make ready for year 2. And subscriber organizations can apply for project capacity up till the end of the year 1 closing. And that, I think those are 5 o'clock dates, or 5 o'clock close of business on those Fridays. The change that's being made in the tariffs is to incorporate a 2-project limit for the interconnection queue for each subscriber organization, but only during the initial 20 business days after we open the year 2 and 3 queue. These revisions are addressing concerns by staff and others that the year 1 application process may have allowed multiple projects for some subscriber organizations while leaving others without any projects. So the order of the interconnection applications is based on the receipt of emails that are received by the utility, and it's typically all the capacity in the areas that are under contention is awarded within the first perhaps even 5 minutes based on what we've seen for year 1. So staff proposed this approach to the working group as a compromise between a couple of options, one of which would have been to simply allow 1 project per subscriber organization to kind of ensure a more broad distribution of projects amongst the existing subscriber organizations, or having no limit as we did with the year 1 process. So we kind of, it's not a full consensus because there are a number of developers who are opposing any form of a limit, but we think that at least limiting it to 2 will be helpful in ensuring that more of the projects are spread out to more of the subscriber organizations. This approach is permitted by the COMAR, which addresses allowing some changes to a simple first come, first served approach in the event multiple applications are received on a single day or in a short period of time. By capping the projects to two that would be awarded to a single subscriber organization, there's going to be some service territories where there's contention, where we know that there are more projects that have been authorized through the commission's process than are available through each utility. We typically see that in the Delmarva service territory and in Potomac Edison, and in particular in the open categories for all the utilities. So these filings were developed in consultation with from staff and members of the net metering working groups. So the utilities assisted us in making these filings. And while it's not a full consensus, we are recommending that you accept the tariffs and will proceed with opening the year 2 process for the community solar program.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderheyden. If any of the utilities wish to share any thoughts, you may approach. It does appear that this would increase efficiencies not only for the utilities but for the developers as well, to know the timelines in advance and to maximize both utility staff resources and focus the resources of the developers in applying to one utility at a time on a staggered basis. So I'm glad that utilities were able to reach agreement on this. You noted that there were some areas where there was no agreement. Could you elaborate on that?
Your Honor, a number of the developers, I think they have a desire to have multiple projects, and they believe that by limiting each subscriber organization and any of their ownership affiliates to only 2 projects would not let them, say, get 3 or 4 from a single utility. And
Understood. Oh, sorry, right. So the max is 2 projects per service territory.
For kind of the first bite at the apple, after 20 business days, the way the tariff is written, they could come back and apply for any remaining capacity.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Just pursuing that, the first year didn't use all of its capacity, right? What was our experience with the developers in that first year in terms of multiple project applications?
The in the Delmarva service territory, I think we've used up most of it. Pepco, I think if you look at the chart there on page 4, Pepco has so the remaining authorized capacity. I'm sorry, it's on page 3, table 2. You'll see that Delmarva, if you take it all the way to the far column, Delmarva's got only 0.74 megawatts. Pepco still has 6, and that's because there was none of their LMI projects were taken up in the Pepco service territory. We believe that had something to do with the cost associated with land in the Pepco zone. Most of the in fact, almost all of the megawatts are in Prince George's County and not in Montgomery County, so there are land expense issues with making that service territory attractive. BG&E still had significant amounts of capacity available, although I believe this number has now been reduced by 1 project or maybe 2 that have come in or will be coming in the next week or so. So there has the open category was used up pretty quickly, as you can see if you look at the open column there. You only have 0.79 available, and that's probably because that's small enough now that you really can't get a big project in. So in the areas where land is inexpensive, that is a desirable place. There's a lot of competition there, and I guess rural areas tend to be less expensive in terms of land prices, and there's probably a lot of farms there. A lot of these projects are being constructed on farmland where the lease.
Mr. Vanderheyden, sorry to interrupt you, but what I'm really asking is how many multiple project applications from a single developer in the first year?
Okay, I understand. I think what we saw in the Delmarva territory, I have a list of what they provided. Just to give you an example, Delmarva is where I think it shows up. We've got 2 projects of the 3 available that went to a single developer. And they have a wait list for projects that probably has, I'm going to say about 10 or so still on that list. So it's the smaller service territories where it's a significant problem. The I think Potomac Edison also was full, although they have 3 there. So I think we're seeing it more in Delmarva. Possibly there would be some in the other in Potomac Edison, and then the open category in itself is also where you see multiple applications being made.
So did I understand you to say there was a waiting list of 10 projects in DPL that didn't make it into the first cut?
Yes, yes. The list is showing probably actually more than 10 that were asked for, and majority of them are the open category. So there's a lot of contention for open, which means they have no restriction on the type of customer or the size or the location of the facility.
Do the other service territories have a waiting list?
Yes, I believe they do. I'm going to say that I think Pepco's did not have one, although I don't have a complete count of their projects.
Do you know if tables 1 and 2 in your buck sheet reflect or are altered in any way by the waivers that we've given to multiple projects that have come before us? In other words, does the waiver affect the capacity numbers in those 2 tables?
It would not, because I don't believe the commission has denied any of the waivers. Had those waivers been denied, the capacity that's authorized, those projects would probably drop out once they hit their deadlines without construction.
I appreciate that. I just note that the multiple waivers we have had come before us and ones that are still in the queue do have the potential to bump other projects who are on the waiting list, or may have bumped them already but are now eating up that capacity. So I just note that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on one of the questions about the multiple developers, going back to Pepco, it looks like they did pretty well in the open category and basically the small category. Do our regulations or our restrictions impede any of those developers that obviously went first to the open category from also participating in LMI or looking at additional projects? I guess the question I'm asking, do all these developers obviously probably rush first to the open category and then the other categories? Are there any developers that are now precluded from developing an LMI project because of our
I don't believe so. I
Okay,
don't believe there's anything in the regulations that is limiting development in the LMI, other than there is a minimum requirement that you must have a certain percentage of your subscriptions from low or moderate income customers, and that they simply may be more difficult to market to, or they may be perhaps more risky in terms of payment of subscriptions. So between the cost of land and actually the density in the Potomac Electric Power Company, the Pepco service territory, it's hard to actually find places where you can build several acres. You may need 10 to 15 acres to put a 2 megawatt facility up.
Okay, so in the near term, there's probably not much we can do with regulations to try to see if we can spur some more activity in the LMI, because it seemed like there ought to be a lot of opportunity in the Pepco service territory to provide those types of projects.
You could consider relaxing some of the requirements on location or co-location of projects, because I believe there are projects that are currently taking advantage of the ability to site multiple 2 megawatt facilities on landfills, for example. And I know that there may be interest in doing LMI projects if they were able to achieve a better economy of scale and or make use of some of these landfills. Landfills are tricky to develop upon because you don't want to puncture the cap, and there's issues that make them more expensive. But in the regulations, there are limitations. Number one, limiting it to 2 megawatts in terms of the scale, and number two, limiting to a single facility on a piece of property. So if you were to relax some of those or consider relaxing those, you could potentially say, well, we didn't get any LMI, so we are going to either relax the conditions, say reduce the number of customers that must be served, so that at least you get perhaps a few hundred LMI customers in the Pepco service territory, or otherwise, change it. That's not something we have considered, but under your direction, we certainly could take that approach to try and enhance it. One of the things that is built into the way the capacity has worked out is if there is not LMI, or if there's extra capacity in any category, at the end of year 2, that capacity will be, I believe, rolled into and prorated to the other facility, the other categories. So that unused LMI capacity will probably be added to the small brownfield or other and the open category, which if there are waitlisted projects, then they will get the green light to go ahead in the open category. So that will probably get used up if there's sufficient demand in the open category in particular, or if there's, there are more landfill properties that can be developed.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that information. At least for me, I'm a little concerned that, in the Pepco service territory that we aren't seeing more development for LMI. It seems like there's a lot of opportunity there, and that was one of the directives from the legislature that we specifically look at that category. And we did try in our regulations to incentivize, or at least to, incentivize that category. So, if there are things that could be specifically proposed, even though we are just in a pilot at this point, to try to maybe spur that, I would, one commissioner would be interested in hearing from stakeholders. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van der Hayden. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, for items 12 and 13, I move the commission accept the tariff revisions for filing to be effective on or after October 19th, 2018 for Pepco, October 24th, 2018 for Potomac Edison, and November 16th, 2018 for DPL.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motions are approved.
The last item on the agenda for today is Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, filed on September 4, 2018, request for a waiver of COMAR 20.31.0508C3.
Thank you. And if counsel for Baltimore Gas and Electric is present, please step forward. Mr. Albert.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. Under the Utility Service Protection Program, USPP, the utility establishes a monthly payment program for a customer, referred to as budget billing, as a way to reduce the risk of service termination due to non-payment of bills. Under COMAR, a first-time applicant for the USPP is allowed to apply to its past unpaid utility charges, known as arrearages, all are part of the financial aid that the applicant receives under the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, known as MEAP. But COMAR states that this election to apply the MEAP grant to arrearages is for one time only, and that subsequent MEAP benefits may not be used to reduce arrearages. In this situation here, BGE is seeking a waiver of this restriction on the use of a MEAP grant to pay an arrearage. Staff's comments cite the 1988 decision by the Commission in case 8091 that indicates the Commission adoption of this restriction on applying a MEAP grant to reduce an arrearage was based on the view that arrearages should be retired by the customer on a prospective basis as part of, it would be baked into that uniform monthly payment. However, some of BGE's low-income customers are facing a hardship from this ban on applying the MEAP grant to arrearages, including that this ban might prevent the customer from reducing its arrearage to below the cap that the Commission has established for participation in the USPP. BGE and other major utilities have received this waiver in prior years. Staff believes that the waiver of this restriction promotes maximum participation in the USPP program and remains an important tool for customers in managing the utility accounts. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission grant the waiver requested by BGE.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. You alluded to the fact that other major utilities have also sought waivers in the past. Do we currently have any other waiver requests in-house currently that you know of?
I think we have WGL. I think Potomac Edison has filed. Typically, we see. We could check on that, but typically they do come in and file about this time of year.
Thank you. In past years, how often does BG&E make this request for a waiver? Is it every year?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Damon Krieger on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Yes, it's been an annual recurrence for quite some time now.
It appears that the intent in MEEP, as Mr. Albert just stated, was to apply these grant funds on a prospective basis. Are we not in violation of at least the intent, if not the letter of MEEP, by granting additional waivers in perpetuity? Or is there a problem if we're continuing to have to grant a waiver every year of our regulations?
There's certainly an opportunity here to convene a working group to consider some changes to this section of COMAR to make the waiver on a permanent basis to the extent the Commission feels that that would be appropriate as opposed to revisiting it every year. But it is an important tool in the toolbox to keeping low-income individuals in service. So there are about 6,000 customers, I think that staff referenced, that would be eligible because they were subject to disconnection or they stopped service in the prior year, and they may have an arrearage in place that if it isn't addressed, they would be perhaps precluded from participating in the program and having their service reconnected. And so I'm not exactly sure what population within that 6,000 would be, would take advantage of having a MEEP grant applied to their arrearage, but it is a significant amount of people that could be, could be harmed to the extent that this waiver isn't granted.
I understand the USPP program is to prevent turnoffs during the winter, but don't we have other regulations that would prevent the utility from turning off customer service from like November through March? Is that right?
There are prohibitions in place depending upon the weather and the time of year, and the USPP program does give some additional protections against disconnection. But the budgeting tool is helpful, and I think some customers, in full transparency, have some concerns with the budgeting tool that it could be restrictive. Some customers feel it's overly restrictive, and they would rather have the actual amounts billed each month and the grants applied there as opposed to the continuing budgeting tool throughout the year. But again, it's another tool in place that's helpful to keep low-income customers in service, and it's worked for a number of years.
Thank you. On one hand, I see it if you're receiving this grant, you have to take the strings that come along with it, including the requirement that you enter some type of budget billing. I am concerned that continual waivers does cut across the intent of what MEEP was designed to promote, was to reduce arrearages on a prospective basis.
Probably one other important point is to the extent that they're not in the U.S. And you can receive a MEEP grant and not enter it into USPP, but if you don't enter in USPP, you can't take advantage of other grants such as the EUSP grant, which is also available to USPP customers. So,
and that could be a larger problem, the fact that we have all these various forms of grants and benefits available to certain customers, that they're all chained together. Thank you. Do other commissioners have concerns, or Commissioner O'Donnell?
Just a quick comment. It's probably a good idea to have a work group look into this, but I think Mr. Krieger may have suggested that work group would propose to simply memorialize the waiver on a permanent basis. I think there needs to be a more robust working out of this issue so that you don't just memorialize the waiver in COMAR, but that you also provide the incentive that we're waiving so that there's some effort at least to prospectively deal with these arrearages. I don't think we should signal as a commission, it's just my opinion, that we simply want a work group to tell us to memorialize this waiver on a permanent basis. I don't know if staff has any comments on that or the company has any comments on that.
Yeah, let me, Mr. Chairman, if I could introduce David Kahn, who's our manager for the Energy Assistance Programs. He I think wants to at least touch base on a working group that was suggested as part of the annual OHEB review. So.
Please, Mr. Kahn, good morning.
For the record, David Kahn with BGE. As I recall, during the hearing a few months ago about the OHEB annual plan, there was some discussion about this budget billing requirement that is part of EUSP, but not, as Mr. Krieger mentions, not part of MEEP. And I think that OHEB itself had asked the question of whether a work group would be a good venue to talk about the different opinions about that particular requirement. I'm not aware of a work group being convened yet, but I think the Commission may have informally encouraged OHEB to sit down with stakeholders to talk about that. So the reason I bring this up is if there's a desire to discuss this particular issue as well, this MEEP waiver, that might be a good venue to do that because I think all those issues are tied together. The only other thing that I would add is the EOSP grant itself originally was intended strictly to be prospective as well. But quite some time ago, the Commission instructed the utilities to do roughly the same as what we're asking to do with MEEP, which is for any customer who's got an existing arrearage at the time they apply for an EUSP grant, that grant ought to be applied first to outstanding charges, and then any leftover amounts would be applied prospectively. So I do think there's a bit of a parallel in what we're seeking today with the MEEP waiver.
No, I see that, and I see the benefit both to the customer who is not at risk of losing service and to the utility to get that grant money to pay off the oldest debt first. Although I agree entirely with Commissioner O'Donnell that if we take a look at this, it's not solely to memorialize this waiver permanently, but to take a look at sort of how all these other benefits for customers at risk play together. And does it make sense, or does it put these customers in a situation where they will continue to accrue arrearages in perpetuity?
Did staff have any comment on?
We have not developed a position on that. I mean, I guess the idea of a working group might be a useful tool to explore how to address this situation, because again, it does recur every year.
And as Mr. Khan noted, when we did have the EUSP hearing about 2 months ago, there was discussion of a working group. This issue did not come up specifically, but it could be one that should be addressed in any future meetings.
I think there's a lot of incentive here, Mr. Chairman, just my opinion, to resolve this issue, because waiving these requirements on an annual basis is not a good way to do business, in my opinion. So maybe the way to get the issues resolved appropriately would be to suggest that the Commission may not be so amenable to offering these waivers in the future.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually think that's an approach worth pursuing. I'd note that these waivers have been requested for many years now. They would actually predate my time in this industry here in Maryland. At the time, many years ago, the MEEP waivers, the amount that a consumer would receive was actually larger. So waiving the USPP requirement actually had a greater benefit in that it helped the customer pay off a lot of their arrearage, in some cases all of their arrearage, and would even allow them to not have to make a payment on their regular usage on the utility bill for the next month or two. And this is leading up to a question that I had for the Commission staff. If the customer has used up their MEEP grant paying the outstanding arrear from the prior year or from a prior period, what type of assistance are they now looking to rely on during the upcoming winter for new usage that they accrue?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that. We could get back to you.
What's that?
Good morning, Commissioners. Margaret Tuberty on behalf of staff. My understanding is that the grant is first applied to the arrearages, and then if there is none left over, then there's no effect on the customer's bill.
Okay. So effectively then, the arrearage assistance money, or MEEP, LIHEAP money is a crisis assistance program. So basically that, if that customer runs into another financial challenge between the time of receiving the grant money and their eligibility for a program assistance grant for the next year, they've basically used up the grant money already. Am I correct in that?
So, Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. I handle a lot of the low-income issues for staff. And with regard to MEEP, this does come up annually. And a difference between MEEP and EUSP is that MEEP is for winter heating. And our regulations do require that it be paid in advance. And the assumption is that the customer will have a small arrearage. I think it's as much as $400 for a BGE customer. To the extent that this is resolved in a working group, or the commission considers it, they might want to consider that and also in combination with how EUSP is currently handled, because the commission has ordered two things, and their most recent order was that it could be put into it could be combined with what is owed at the time the EUSP grant is received, so that it effectively pays a portion of arrears and a portion going forward. I don't know if that helps any, but
Well, I think it somewhat addresses the concern that I was raising. But I think the primary point, and not to belabor it here now, but I think that there's three different programs that are kind of circling each other here. All of them have been adopted at different periods of time. So there's certain, and pointing out the Department of Human Resources has their own administrative process and their own COMAR for managing the EUSP program and the LIHEAP program. The Commission's program with USPP, of course, is in our COMAR regulations. So there is, I think, a need to streamline the three of them. And this waiver request today, which at least for now I think is okay, but if we just keep adopting it, I think I'm echoing what my colleagues have said already, that we don't ever get to the bottom of this and address it. Noting the fact that the LIHEAP grant money amounts have been dropping, and even some of the RGGI grant money has not been as reliable as it has been in the past. So this is an issue that is going to impact a lot of customers if we don't find a way to streamline it and get it addressed in a way that it works well for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Linton. Seeing no other comments, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for item number 14, I move we grant the company a waiver of COMAR 20.31.05.08C3 for the 2018-2019 winter heating season.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you.
There are no other items on the agenda.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Madam Secretary. This concludes the administrative meeting, although this afternoon we will convene a public conference, PC 50, to examine retail gas issues for the coming winter season for 2018-2019. That will begin at 1:30 today. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you.